Welcome to the special edition of Aim Higher in Education's Reel to Reel series. In this video, I want to celebrate Juneteenth 2021 by remembering Black women in business, entertainment, and the arts. I am speaking to Michele Wells, founder of Run On Productions LLC. Run On Productions is a theater and film company that creates original stories that amplify the experiences of the African diaspora. We are proud to have Michele join us as we listen to her story. Let us meet her now. Thank you so much for being part of this program, and we're really lucky to have you. Give me a little background about yourself.
As you know, I worked at the U.S. Agency for International Development after I finished my bachelor's degree in economics at Spelman College. And that was a really pivotal summer experience for me because it really showed me how divorced economic theory is from society. And learning about economic development in a classroom and then going and interning with USAID, just two totally different experiences. And one thing that really stood out to me that summer was the potential role of performance in protecting the identity of people both in Africa and in the African diaspora.
What do you mean by protecting?
So when I was in visiting you all in Burkina Faso, I went to visit the Bright schools. Mm-hmm. The young girls, when they go to school, eventually have to do their studies in French. And their parents, their families speak More. So I saw this separation between the experience of the girls at school and the experiences of their mothers. Mm-hmm. And as an African American, it really landed with me in a particular way because the language is a way in which it reflects how you think about the world and your particular way of being in the world. One of the girls at, I think it was the school in Kaya, showed me where she lived, and her mom was farming, and I learned that, she would fetch water and do different tasks. And so basically mother and daughter have two totally different experiences now. And so I began to think about how performance could serve as an intervention in preserving the history, the mother's history, and the history of the mothers before, while allowing those young girls to get the opportunity to have this different education. I, after that experience, ended up getting a fellowship with the Mellon Foundation and studied performance in the African diaspora. And as I was telling you, I hadn't had the opportunity to return to Africa. I did, however, have the opportunity to study performance in Brazil. Brazil has the largest population of people of African descent outside of the African continent. I also studied in Jamaica. And so I got a sense of the ways in which performance is used as a vehicle for preserving and protecting identity. I went to London, did a one-year master's in performance making. I returned to the US and I started my company, Run On Productions. While I was still in London, I submitted the first play that I wrote, The War at Home, to the Atlanta Black Theater Festival. And The War at Home is based on the true stories of Black men and women who had been murdered by police officers during the 1940s. And so when I got back to the US, the play was selected. The play premiered in October 2014 at the Atlanta Black Theater Festival, got the Best Play Award in its category. But that was also 2 months after Michael Brown had been killed in Ferguson. And so even though my play was set in 1940 in Alabama, the audience after the performance just stayed in the lobby for hours because to them, the difference between what they saw on stage versus what they saw in the video recording of what happened to Michael Brown was, there was just a through line for them. And so I returned to California, to the Bay Area. I approached the city about providing me with funding to work with formerly incarcerated persons. And the reason why I chose formerly incarcerated persons is because they're the most policed, and because the population that is most likely to take the life of a police officer is formerly incarcerated persons. 90% of the people who kill a police officer in the line of duty are formerly incarcerated. One of the people working in the city of Richmond said, well, why not have the police there? And I said, maybe I'll do that. So that's how Theater for Humanity got started, bringing together police officers and formerly incarcerated persons. And that was in 2015.
What are you working on now? Let me ask that.
So now what I'm working on, so after I started doing Theater for Humanity, there was a documentary film made about it, The Act of Being. I traveled with that, and I realized that I needed to have the opportunity to take the time to measure the impact of the work. My background in theater did not equip me to deal with those things. So I started to get more involved in the reentry community and probation department. I started to get more involved, but I decided that I really wanted to step away from the work to measure it and think about it so I could return to it with strength. So that's why I'm now in my second year of my PhD here at Stanford. And I came here specifically to design tools for measuring Theater for Humanity. And my hope is that when I finish my PhD, I will have a training program and a curriculum so that if anyone anywhere wants to use Theater for Humanity as a tool for working with police departments and formerly incarcerated persons, then they have something to work with and they can adapt it to their local environment.
Have you felt like this is something that is hard for you to do as a Black woman?
I was producing a play. I remember arriving at the theater. The person who was greeting me said, "Would you mind waiting outside until your producer arrives?" And I said, "I am the producer." So there's a wide range of things that people think about you when you're a Black woman. Yes, it's very difficult. And I always have to deal with the notion that people think I'm incapable. It's always going to be there, I think. But I think that just being present and existing is revolutionary for me. I always remember that it's not about me, it's about them. There are preconceived notions, there are ideas that we have about each other based upon what we see. How do we have all of this modern technology that our ways of interacting as human beings are so antiquated. And so how do we evolve and become more and better as just human beings in dealing with each other? And so whenever I have moments of just needing to build myself up, I just turn to the history of Black women and our histories and what we've been through. And I lean into that for inspiration, because as difficult as it may be for me, it was far more difficult for someone else.
Have you had, people trying to, like, I guess, put a stick in your wheels to stop it from going?
Yes. All of the things that we've talked about thus far, no one told me to do these things. I had to know within myself my own value. I know myself, I value myself, and I protect who I am from any outside influence. I think that as a Black woman, you just have to guard that for yourself. When people try to stop me, it hurts, but it doesn't shake my core.
Obviously, even during COVID, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges women, African American women, Black women, will face, in the coming few years?
Access to healthcare, access to adequate healthcare has already been an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So health will continue to be an issue. Something strange happened with COVID, which was also that seemingly we had a wake-up call where we all have decided that Black Lives Matter. It's been a very jarring experience. But I think that Black women have been left out of that conversation. I think Black Lives Matter is really about violence against Black men for the most part. And at the same time, Black Lives Matter, the organization itself, is really steered by Black women. So I think that Black women are still in the space of stuckness where it comes to protecting and serving Black men at their own expense. And I think that Black women should continue to be there for others, but need to think more about how to be there for themselves and each other.
Who are some of the people who have inspired you or kind of help with keeping with your belief system and continuing and, whether it's been through like somebody who's popular, famous, or just somebody who's, within your community? Are there any people that have uplifted you and supported you?
Well, of course, first I have to say there's you.
No, thank you.
I'll also say my grandmother. My grandmother and my grandfather. My grandmother is going on 95, and she and my grandfather co-founded a church in Richmond, California. They migrated from Louisiana to California in 1940, around 1940. And my grandmother is just the backbone of it all. And her work ethic, her care for so many people. Her house is just like a place of a refuge for so many. Like, gosh, there are so many women. I'm just looking at my bookshelf now, Michelle Alexander and the New Jim Crow. And there's just so many women who I respect and admire, but I think my grandmother is perhaps like a standard for me.
Do you have any lessons that you feel like you've learned?
The pandemic reminded me that I began with a purpose. And so I needed to return to examining that purpose and evaluating what I had come to. And sometimes you're at a place where you're choosing between several different good options. And so it kind of seems like, well, nothing here is bad, so therefore I can just choose whatever I want. But I think that what I realized was returning to my purpose and my original vision made clear which path to take. And I think in the course of my work in general, I would say one of the most important lessons that I learned was to always question my assumptions. In particular, when I first started doing Theater for Humanity, I had very specific ideas about police and who they were and what role they would play in my work. For me, they were there to serve the purpose of, they were there to help the formerly incarcerated people. They were there to do something that they should be doing because as a group, they have just not performed well. But as I got to know them, and as I began to engage with their humanity, and as I began to realize how much trauma they experience on their jobs and how much support they don't have. And there was one workshop where a formerly incarcerated person came up to me afterwards and said, I think the police really needed to talk today about what they're going through. One of the dangers in fighting for justice for a particular group of people is that we can become callous to the human needs of people who are not in that group. And so I think just developing a default disposition of compassion towards all people has been something that I learned throughout my work.
Are you working with, in your production company, do you have other people that you work with?
I have in the past had other people that I work with. And then when I moved to Stanford, I stopped actively working on producing, but I'm now starting again. So hopefully once we're able to be in person again with the pandemic, I can reassemble my old team and bring in some new people that I've met since coming here and begin to work again. But of course now I'm moving into virtual reality with Theater for Humanity because of the social distancing practices that are in place. So I'll be trying out a VR program in a local prison, hopefully by the end of the year.
Is there anything else that you want to add? Any closing thoughts that you want to share?
No, I have nothing. This has been so great to reflect on these things with you and to get to see you again. It's been really great.
Thanks again for joining me on this very rich and fun discussion with Michele Wells. I hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you again soon.